Yes, hello, folks. Welcome to the weekly Manchester United podcast. I'm your host, as always, Phil Bragg. Join my regular co-host, the excellent James Rhodes, as we finally have now a conclusion to the whole Erik Ten Hag saga. How you doing, mate?
Good, good. Yeah, happy to have this done and have some things to talk about and discuss and to hopefully move forward with as well.
Yeah, I think whatever your hopes were on the outcome. First of all, I'm glad to have it over. I can understand there'll be a lot of people upset, disappointed by the news. I completely respect that. I completely respect the fact that if you wanted a different manager, there was legitimate reasons for that. Just as legitimate as the people that wanted him to stay. You could easily make a case either way, and I think this was really the delay with Ineos was that there was a really strong case either way, whether to keep him or whether not to keep him, and they probably felt like a lot of us did, where there was, we were conflicted, and I think any of us will learn from this process. I don't think they'll ever be in this position again where, obviously the next time they have to make this decision, they'll be much better placed to make it much more expeditiously. But um, it to me is the right decision. However, the fact he's getting a new contract would suggest to me that the new contract will have a lot of contingencies in it that
Yeah.
if certain specific goals aren't met, it'll be easy to terminate Ten Hag without major compensation being paid. Obviously, a restructure of the terms and conditions that he was hired under. So I think you'll see differences when it comes to recruitment, his responsibility in recruitment, his input in recruitment. Obviously, there's been a lot of talk about the veto side of it. We'll get into that, and how his job will change dramatically. Very, very informative piece by Laurie Whitwell in the Athletic, which confirmed a lot of things that you and I talked about,
Yep.
and had, of course, added a lot of other very pertinent information. But what's your take on all this?
Yeah, well, obviously there's going to be a lot of debate about the merits of either way that things have gone. I think that most people at this point in time probably are a little more concerned by the messiness and
Mm.
maybe some of this comes across, maybe it's true. I think some of it is true, certainly. The appearance of the indecisive nature of the way that things have gone, the appearance of walking back or changing or flip-flopping because, one of the biggest things I think we all wanted from Ineos leadership coming in is an end to sagas, an end to delay, because for the most part, sagas with transfers, sagas with managers, sagas with all these things come down to a lack of decisiveness and indecision, going back and forth in your arguments. Obviously, one of the major factors in all of this that just is the reality is they haven't been at the club very long. Even Chelsea, in their decision-making process to change Pochettino and get somebody in, have had their owners and directors in now for a couple of years in order to make a decision quickly. Liverpool have had their owners in for a long, long time. Dan Ashworth would probably be the individual that Ineos would have liked to make this decision, to be sort of the kingmaker, so to speak, within a club like this. And he's not there, and it's a lot messier with him than it is with Omar Barada, but that is not Barada's specialty, I guess I would say, in making those appointments, and his experience. And one of the things that I think I would say, because my opinion has obviously definitely leaned more towards a replacement being the better outcome,
Mhm.
where I think yours has been on the opposite on this. We've had that discussion, many times as in terms of the
Just
debating merits
slightly
and
though.
stuff.
Like
Yeah, no,
I'm
I
not,
understand. I
I'm
think
not. certain to maybe
Yeah,
slightly confident, but not so. And
and
it wouldn't
reasonable.
take much for me to change my mind. Like a bad start would change my mind quickly.
Right. Well, and that's the thing about it, right? Is what you said, I think, is important because I think that there's a lot of people who are looking at it and saying, this seems like a bad decision. How are you giving him a new contract as well? And I think that is an important thing to actually understand contextually because even as someone who thought he probably should go, I don't think a new contract is a reward. I don't think a new contract is, we're going to give you a whole bunch of extra time with no contingencies because you've done such a great job. Quite the reverse. Um, there's these major topics that they need to resolve in this contract that are, even as so far as reports are going today, the subject of discussion over whether a new contract will be agreed or not, which have to do with the changes in the role. And you can't do those things without having a new contract because they're written into his current contract.
Yeah.
And so those have to be addressed. Those have to be resolved. Those are the things that have to be done for him to stay. And I completely agreed. All along, we've talked about this, that if you had three outcomes, Ten Hag staying, Ten Hag going, the worst possible outcome would be if he stayed on his current deal because he becomes, like a president after they've been voted out of office in those final months. They can't do anything. They lose the respect of the locker room. They're going to be distracted with reports all the time. They have no job security. They have no nothing, and it's not firmly laid in stone. With a new deal, you can, as you said, lay out these targets. Here's where we need to be by November. Here's where we need to be by February. Here's where we need to get by the end of the season. And if those aren't met, you have break clauses, things like that, that can be put in place. We'll see what actually ends up in there. But, a lot more clarity on the specifics of what is needed and what is being asked for. And so I think that's a much better outcome. Hopefully they agree to it. If they go into this now and they can't agree on a new deal, then I think it looks really bad, the situation as a whole there.
I'd imagine a lot of the terms that are in that deal have already been pre-agreed with Ten Hag. Maybe not were to the point where he entirely supports all of these.
Sure.
Obviously, the transfer veto was one thing. Excuse me. But there's a lot of ways to veto a transfer without having transfer veto. I
Sure.
mean, if a player wants to come to your football club, a player wants to sit down with the guy who's picking the team. And if the guy who's picking the team says it's not me that wants you, it's the club, you veto a transfer, whether you have it or not. You can get away with that with young players that aren't expecting to play. Right away, they'll come to a football club and expect at some point to break into the team. But guys that are coming to play, that's different. And, the other aspect of this, James, is the transfer budget. Without selling, from what is being reported, is extremely modest. So United are going to have to get busy selling. They're going to sell obviously Mason Greenwood, which looks very possible.
Yeah, to Juventus now. That's turning up. Yeah.
Jadon Sancho, obviously, there'll have to be others that will have to go.
You think Sancho has any chance of returning now?
Yeah, I don't think he's any chance of returning, but I don't see any benefit to loaning him out to Borussia Dortmund again, unless it's a huge loan fee and they're
an
covering
obligation on the other end.
Then to me it makes zero sense. The question is how many other clubs will want them at a big fee, but they're going to have to get busy selling. Look, I think with Ten Hag, the job that he had, the job that he has will be completely different. This is essentially Ineos his contract renewals is essentially Ineos hiring him on their terms.
Sure.
And saying, okay, we're going to structure a contract that's going to work around our terms, our expectations, because there's a reality we faced. Even sacking him would have cost not just the compensation for him, but the compensation for his staff is significant. So if you get these people on new contracts, I would imagine his staff will have to agree to new contracts if they want to stay on Ineos's terms that give them very easy outs if certain goals aren't met. He will be on a very short leash.
Yep.
You know, I know the fan sentiment right now is for him to stay, especially after the cup final. But you and I both know how quickly that can change. If you need
Mhm.
to get off to a similar start like they did last season, confidence in Ten Hag will dissipate very very quickly, and it'll be really easy at that point to sack him. If you look at Ineos's options on this, um, you could sack him. Then you're completely on the hook for the performance of his replacement. If you don't have a huge transfer budget, you're making life difficult for that individual right away. If they'll be responsible for underwhelming signings. If you keep him, um, you're it's much easier to turn around in October, November and say we give this guy a chance. We're going to replace him, and Ineos won't really be held accountable for his failure, in my opinion, because they gave him a chance. Um, there's obviously the fact that the Don Ashworth isn't there, Barada isn't there. These are decisions that they'll have to be heavily involved in. United would have to be very careful about getting them involved in a process, considering Don Ashworth's email and the some of the litigation that could happen over that. So I think that that might have been a factor. But look, here's the thing on this: a lot of things are true that Ineos at one point did decide to sack Ten
Mhm.
Hag. The
Yep.
Crystal Palace result was huge in their
Mhm.
thinking. And they had every right to be angry after that. Every single right. That was a horrendous performance, horrendous result, and a type of performance that gets a manager sacked. Um, they had certain candidates that they liked, really liked for different reasons. I mentioned that Southgate was one of those because they liked that he brought harmony to the England dressing room. They liked the fact that he was willing to leave established players out, bring young players in. And they felt that he would work within their structure, which we don't really know exactly what that is. Um, so I think that there's certain people getting grief over some of the reporting, but the reality is this shifted so many
Mhm.
times. And look, it's healthy to have diversity of viewpoint and disagreement amongst people that are making this decision. That's what you should have. There wasn't the consensus. They eventually came to an understanding, which will probably be a compromise where, okay, we'll keep them on certain conditions that are it's a short leash. That's usually how this works. But then there's the other issue, James, of how does Ten Hag achieve their confidence, and how does he achieve their trust? The only
Yeah.
way to do that is to win games of football, and he will have to do that immediately. I mean, there will never be a repeat of last season.
For sure. And I think that, he has probably three major things that he's going to have to kind of tick off this coming season in order to gain their trust. And it's not going to be waiting necessarily to the end of the season to see that happen. The first thing will be over the next few weeks agreeing on this contract, pretty quickly, ideally, because you need that clarity for the future as well. Agreeing on this new contract within the terms of how they lay it out, with regards to transfers, with regards to other aspects as well. Um, Obviously they're going to want to have discussions of the things like the game model and all of that, but initially agreeing to change sort of the role and accepting that part of it within their structure, whatever that may be. That'll be number one, showing that flexibility from his end to fit with them as you said, as you put it, which I think was good, as they're hiring him on newly as their coach, as their head coach or their manager, however they want to put it. They'll have to see that. The second thing is obviously winning games this year. I can't agree with the concept some people have put that it'll be his first season, because
Hmm.
even if it's his first season in a new structure, the one thing he's been the whole time is the coach. It's his
Yeah,
third season as a coach,
yeah, it's definitely not
period.
his first season. I wouldn't agree with
That
that
is
either.
not changing. His on the pitch with these players in training is his third season with many of them. He that has to do better. We have to see a lot more in terms of structure, in terms of ideas, in terms of the day-to-day play on the pitch that you'd expect from a third season manager. Um, he's going to have to win games. You're not getting to perform like we did last year. We're not going to be allowed to scrape through, away games against bottom half teams, barely winning. These are not things that are going to be allowed in order for him to earn that trust. And the third thing I think that he has to resolve, and is something that for me is up in the air, and I think is something that's going to come to a head even through the transfer window as well, is the issues with management and communication of the players in the dressing room, um, and having a lot more clarity. And obviously, I think that's something the club and Jason Wilcox can help with, and be instructive in. But you can't have so many issues with players in the dressing room in the next season. Um, that's something I think that has to be clear, because while there's always going to be disagreements, there's always going to be little things that come up, and winning in many cases solves everything. It's always the case in sport. Um, there's improvement that needs to be made there in the case of working with people, and I do wonder still. So this is sort of up for debate, I suppose, and up, I think, something on I've seen questioned in a lot of articles. But I still wouldn't be surprised if, as a part of this, Ineos United go ahead and look to appoint an assistant of their own to come in there and work within this, alongside Ten Hag, but in connection with the players and in connection with Wilcox, and somebody that's a little more instructive on the way that they view things to help bridge the gap, perhaps. And that could be a good thing. Sir Alex changed his assistants a lot over the years as a part of working things out on different aspects, and I think that could be kind of important too. But that's the third major factor that I think we'll want to see over the season, and even over the summer and preseason as well. Um, yeah.
Yeah, look, leadership, you have to have a certain personality. You have to be consistent with your application of
Mm,
rules, discipline. Players have to know exactly where they stand. They have to know where boundaries are. They have to know there's also a human being behind the exterior,
yeah.
someone that's sympathetic to problems. I mean, we talk about Fergie, he was a disciplinarian, but he was also benevolent when he needed to be. I
Mhm.
mean, like if you hear about Ronaldo when his father died, go take as long as you need. Go take care of
Yeah.
family. I mean, you'll hear a lot of stories about that about Ferguson with stuff like that. He also knew there was a time to put an arm around the shoulder of
Yeah.
players, and there's no question that Ten Hag has mixed support inside United with players. Some players like him, some players don't. I've spoken to some of them. Some of the stuff that came back was quite heavy.
Mhm. Yeah.
I suppose these things happen all the time in dressing rooms. It's just shocking when sometimes it's a bit surprising when you hear it. Um, and I wasn't there, so you never know if you're being told the complete truth or not. You never know what actually happened. But Ten Hag definitely has a job on his hands trying to unify that dressing room. And look, sometimes this makes you a better manager. Sometimes you have to admit some of your own shortcomings and say, okay, I have to do better on stuff like this. These are things
Mhm.
that I have to improve on, and for you to be successful in any business, you have to have the support of your staff. They don't all have to love you; they have to respect you. And I think this is a major challenge for Ten Hag with some of the players that he has at United, and getting them on side. Look, to me, you address this issue. Players are happy when they're playing well, and they're winning games of football. All
Yep.
the other nonsense disappears.
Yep.
All the little microaggressions disappear. They don't turn into major issues. They're quickly forgotten. And this is really the what you were saying about scraping wins away from home against slower opposition. It's okay to do that sometimes, but that can't be the norm.
Yeah.
Like
Yep.
the United have to have, for me, an aura again and a consistency and a predictability. It says, okay, they're not going to win the league. That's fine. But in his first season, there was a bit of an aura and a
Mm.
predictability about the fact that they lost against City and the 6-3, and I think they went 9 games. They won like the next 8 or 9 games in a row.
Yep.
That's what he's going to have to do. And the thing is, James, how he starts is so important because
Mm-hmm.
if he needs about, in my opinion, 6, 7 wins in a row at the start,
Yeah.
so that the question over his future goes away.
Yep.
If he loses, 1 or 2 games at the start, his future is going to be a constant question. So he needs to address that question by winning games of football. And I have a sense that the people who have agreed to keep Ten Hag are could easily be convinced otherwise if you need to
Mm-hmm.
start poorly.
Yep.
So in many ways, Ten Hag's going to have to perform to the level that a new manager would. He's going to have to come in. He's going to have to hit the ground running. United are going to have to play well, and for him to agree to a new contract and to get a new contract, he will have had to have agreed that that is a requirement and that he has to live up to that requirement. Now the onus is on Ineos to give him a squad that's capable of doing that. So, if you can sit there and say, we want you to win all these games of football, we want you to play exceptional football, we want you to play a certain way, okay, but you got to give me the tools to do it. Where everybody wants to play that way. Everybody wants to win games of football every week. Everybody wants what you want. But if you want that, that also requires a commitment on your part. Ineos are going to have to make sure that a manager's discipline is respected, that there are no sympathetic ears to players who are trying to skirt discipline,
Yeah.
and so that there is complete alignment from top to bottom on discipline structure, and actually take that out of the manager's hands and say these are club disciplinary rules, not
Yep.
manager. So we
Yep.
will hold you accountable, not the manager, if you do certain things like the Jadon Sancho situation or others. The
Mm-hmm.
manager has to be supported. If you want to implement standards and maintain them and create an environment where players respect that authority, then it has to be upheld right throughout the club.
For sure. And I think that sometimes I think people get confused or put a lot of the when you talk about dressing room harmony and even discipline and some of the concepts you're just talking about, I think they confuse it sometimes with player power. Um, because so I get a lot of the feedback or a lot of the statements from fans about you know players almost not being allowed to have issues with things or not being if there's ever any dressing room issue, then it's entirely on them and they should just listen to the manager as this authority figure. But it's not the reality of how things are. Nobody rules and leads to success in an authoritarian manner. It doesn't succeed. It doesn't work. Um, and it is something that they all have to. That is a group thing. And as you said, it's about having these standards from the club themselves to lay down the discipline so that it's evenly applied to everybody, and they're all there on the same terms, and they're all there evenly, and they're all there for the right reasons and with one common goal. One of the things that I do think is going to be improved drastically next season, and that has been a big focus of Ineos and Sir Dave Brailsford specifically, that they can control and that they can improve quite a lot of is on the injury front of things.
Mm-hmm.
Luke Shaw's made some interesting
Mm-hmm.
comments, of course, some very interesting comments on what
Yeah,
happened, and he's absolutely correct. And I feel very bad for a lot of the players at United in this instance of how certain things have been mismanaged. Harry Maguire is missing the Euros on the basis of pushing through injury for United.
mm-hmm.
And it's really unfair of people to have questioned some of their commitments to these things because they all pushed through injuries and in many instances got re-injured, and ended up out longer because they pushed to come back early. They pushed through these injuries. They pushed to play. And I'm not talking about this and putting it on the manager. I understand, there's comments from Luke Shaw saying the manager asking him to play and all of that. And yeah, that's something where I think you want a little less influence from a manager because a manager is always going to want his players to play and ask them to, and players are always going to try to make themselves available. That's why it's sort of ridiculous. Some of the things that are leveled at players, they make themselves available as much as they can, often when they shouldn't. But one of the things that did occur is, and I have this on pretty strong authority as well, is that there were definitely worries from players such as Mason Mount about how their rehab was being handled through
Of
the
course,
injuries. And to the point where they were so concerned that many of them started talking to their own advisors and people like that, about, was this being done right? There was a departure, and I'm not going to say specifically this was the reason why, but there was a departure of one of the head physio at United back in January. This was a decision that was taken by Gary O'Driscoll, and from my understanding of things, he's someone who's worked really tightly with Sir Dave on all of this, because they've come in and looked at it and seen a disaster at United and seen things happening that absolutely cannot happen anymore and should not happen, and were seriously putting people at risk. And at best, players being extremely concerned that they were being put at risk with situations that were ongoing. That's something that has to change and is changing and is being worked on. Performance, athletics, all of that. These are areas people like Sir Dave Brailsford has expertise in and can
yeah, I'm
provide
gonna
very
say that.
valuable insight into. And is working with Gary O'Driscoll, and obviously they hired a new physio who he knows from Arsenal as well, that he trusts. And I think that that is a good thing. And I strongly not suspect, but expect that we'll have a much different situation next year on the injury front in terms of how things handle. That's not to say players won't get injured, but sometimes, the injury crisis can be exacerbated because it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy of trying to push players too much to return, and then they get injured again, and then you have longer outages, and it gets worse and worse and worse. And there's a point where the medical team need to be able to and need to hold firm on what is in the best interest of the players, and just stick to that, and get people healthy, and more investment is needed. The rehabs to Carrington are needed so that they can do their job properly as well. There's no doubt. But that is an area I do expect, no matter who is the manager, is going to be hugely improved next year. It's a big focus.
Yeah, Luke, this is a massive problem. And this is one thing, like you say, Dave Brailsford has enormous expertise in, where his expertise will be required. It's interesting because in my conversations with some of the players about Ten Hag, I was asking them about Ineos and Brailsford and what have you. I got quite good feedback on Brailsford, actually.
Yeah.
They said that he's someone that genuinely cares, that understands his
Yep.
limitations, that understands the lane he should be in, that understands where his expertise starts and where it ends. That's really, really important, because I
Yeah.
was concerned about how much input people like Brailsford would have with Ten Hag. But Ineos are smart people. Obviously, they limited his input to his areas of expertise. The medical department is a huge problem. You can't be sending players. I mean, I don't know specifically about Mason Mount, but I know that this has been an issue for players, about how the rehab is managed, and some of the reasons given for that simply is that United didn't have the staff to manage long-term rehab of players and prioritize the fitness of players that were out on a short-term basis to get them back on the pitch. So their focus was on short-term injuries and getting them back on the pitch. But the problem is, when you look at the long-term injuries, I mean, the Malacia situation is an embarrassment.
Mm.
Licha Martinez, a metatarsal injury, which was common 15 years ago, not particularly complex surgery, botched, and, Luke Shaw having setbacks, and this is all we ever heard. Mason Mount constantly injured. Now, I know he had injuries before he came to Old Trafford, but it looks horrendous, and this is something that has to get fixed. This is something where Ten Hag has legitimate mitigation reasons and legitimate reasons for United underperforming. I mean, not having a left back is a massive weakness, James. Massive,
Yeah.
massive weakness. Not having a fit centre back when you're playing Casemiro back there. These are the things that can't happen. I mean, when was the last time you saw Real Madrid take the pitch without a left back or without a centre back? I mean, when was the
Yeah.
last time you saw any top club do that? I mean, these clubs have adequate cover. They have adequate medical departments. They understand how important it is, and they prioritize winning on the pitch more than anything else. This is something United haven't done. It's going to take quite a lot of work to fix this. Um, it's going to require time that any of us don't really have because they're going to get judged harshly out of the gate.
Yep.
And look, it's going to be interesting to see how they go about the recruitment this summer because when you look at the priorities, I don't know. Don't be don't be sending me any anthrax to the post here or anything, but maybe Elise isn't a priority.
No, I mean, I
You look
understand.
at
I
the left back
understand.
because
Yeah.
you look at that right wing, you're
Yeah.
going, Ahmad, Garnacho, you've still got Anthony there, and I'm not saying that Elise isn't a magnificent player. He is, but when you need a centre back, a left back, a defensive midfielder, and according to the Athletic, your net spend at the moment is around £65 million. Obviously, that'll be boosted by sales. It's hard to see how the numbers work.
Yeah. Well, I totally understand when you're talking about priorities. They're strongly still chasing, Gerard Braithwaite, and they have backup options. Euro would be amazing if he ends up not going to Madrid. We know that those are the priorities. And then they have kind of almost Todibo, I feel like, is almost like, how would I put it? Like it's there for the taking. Maybe he's not the top of the list. That doesn't mean he's not super highly rated, but he's there for the taking, and I think would be a great signing. So yeah, there's priorities. Uh, Kirkus, this young left back that also Fabrizio has confirmed they're interested in, I think would be a huge priority. I would for sure rather they sign him before a winger if you're prioritizing budgets, no doubt about it, because Luke Shaw, I think, is an incredible player. Into a sort of a wider discussions, one of the things that really worked last season was Rashford and Luke Shaw's partnership. It was practically automatic when they played together that they would get a goal. And it's incredibly unfortunate how little Luke Shaw's been able to play over the last few years.
Yeah.
And really in the year since his, injury, it just that kind of derailed his whole career. But that is a huge priority because when you look at performance and a straight line way to get the club back to a solid level, that's one of those kind of simple partnerships of a fullback and a winger that could change everything. We've seen the partnership of even Dallo and whoever's on that right wing make a big difference towards the end of the year in terms of scoring goals and all of that. And so, I definitely think that they should, I guess, that's a priority. At the same time, I think that one of the things that we don't totally know yet is how the game will change towards the end of the season. And I think this is a really interesting discussion. Towards the end of
Yeah.
the season, we changed how we played, and the FA Cup final, which is said to be a big factor in all of this. No Rasmus Højlund in the team, and I'm not picking on him again. We've discussed this before. As a player, I'm talking about style, about this setup where the striker was a bit, and I'll say this for Ten Hag, when he first came in, he believed he could get Anthony Martial going, right? Now, Anthony Martial is a striker, not that dissimilar to Bruno Fernandes playing as a striker, in terms of somebody dropping in deep, getting involved in the build-up, letting those wingers come up there. Marcus Rashford in the FA Cup final played as the outlet ball again, as he did last season. He played as the first man leading the line, not as a touchline winger. And it paid dividends, him and Garnacho kind of playing in that role that resulted in those goals. And we kind of saw evidence of that leading up to the FA Cup final. And it begs the question, how do the priorities fit? Because if you're keeping Rasmus Højlund 100% in that role, then I still firmly believe you almost have to get a new winger because you can't keep playing Garnacho and Rashford beside him. It just doesn't work. But when they're talking about wingers who I understand are, strikers that I understand
Wait, you want to
are.
get a winger and play him centrally?
No. Sorry. When you get when you're talking about strikers that we're hearing about that I think are a priority of the names of like a Xerxes or an Ivan Toney, you're talking about a different type of striker, a different type of number 9 to
Mm.
Rasmus Højlund at this stage in his career,
Yes.
which almost are more like Kane, right? Which we know would have been the ideal player last year. Then maybe you don't need a winger because you can have those runners playing off of that player, right? And you wonder maybe it's okay to have two different profiles of striker, but how plays in. So I think there's some questions that aren't answered yet, but I think that there is a reality that they're looking to that type of forward. I also think they would really like to have that type of winger, especially if they do move on Greenwood to Juventus and Sancho. I think they would move on Anthony if they could, but that's a question of how more than anything else.
Mhm.
But for sure, if I was to look at the priorities now, I would say, yeah, there's evidence that getting in a striker who's a bit different to Rasmus Højlund might be higher up the list in terms of how they want to play successfully. Um, because quite frankly, if they were to keep on how they were playing last year, I don't know that Marcus Rashford has a place in the team, and I think he would feel the same, in terms of getting the
Mm.
most out of his strengths as a player, right? That role. Um, and then you still need a winger anyway. So a lot of big decisions have to be made in there, but definitely those are, I think, the major decisions that do have to be made before someone like an Elise is center back,
Yeah.
fullback, and that forward, number 9 position for sure.
I think for Marcus Rashford, this is a huge summer in the sense that
Mm,
there has to be a very clear conversation with Ten Hag about
yeah.
what his role is in the team and where he plays.
Mm,
Um, Having a fit left back week in, week out allows Rashford to play higher up the field. It
yes.
absolves him of some defensive responsibilities. Um, and Rashford's a forward. He doesn't want to defend. He's not. It's not his thing. And to be fair, it's you want him getting the ball on the other end of the pitch.
You want him in the other half, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
I mean, there's no question, James, and I know this for a fact that Rashford's role in the team this season was changed from what it was the previous year, and he was asked to play in a deeper role, not as close to Rasmus Højlund. But once they brought in Højlund, they didn't want him playing as close to Højlund,
yep.
and being the most furthest advanced uh, forward player. You'll see in a lot of times when United are counter-attacking, the most advanced forward player is Garnacho. Garnacho's had an exceptional season, brilliant player, love him dearly. Marcus is at a different point in his career where he needs to be
Yep.
happy as a human being. He has to deal with what goes on off the field. A lot of people won't have sympathy. I do because I hear it in a different way. And when you humanize someone, you realize what they go through. You understand that you can be cruel yourself to other players, and you think about how I think about how I speak sometimes about other players.
Yeah.
It's made me have double takes where I'm like, do I really want to say that about someone? Do is this because you think you're the only person saying it, but when you have a million people saying it,
Yeah.
it is it's. I don't know if it really helps, and this is one of the curses of social media, the immediacy it gives you when you're venting your views. In the past, you just vent them to a friend or two. And then, of course, an hour later, when you're calmed down, you have a completely different take, which is far more rational. I think for Marcus Rashford, he's at an inflection point in his career where he needs to decide for himself personally, what does he want? Is he capable of playing at United and being happy in this Ten Hag team? I don't know. Only he knows that. Is he capable of living in Manchester and being happy? He has his family to think about. I don't know. Only he knows that. I just want to see the best for him. I want to see him at his best because I think in there, a happy Marcus Rashford, there's a world-class footballer in there. I think it's a big summer for him, and for what happens going forward. Um,
Yep.
so I think signing a left back is fundamental to getting the best out of him. I don't know how easy it would be to move on at this point outside of England, because what type of, how many teams have the money to buy him at this point? Maybe PSG. I don't know. Would he go there? I don't know.
Mm.
Um, I highly doubt he would go to another team in England. He's a big United supporter. He loves the football club. And you know, I don't know if he'd be any happier anywhere else in England. So I don't know. It's a big decision for him. It's a big decision for the club, and
Hmm.
this is a decision that has to get made this summer. Uh, so I want nothing but the best for him. Does it do for every United player? And I hope this United find a resolution to this problem. Um, one thing I will say about Hoyland is I think he can play in a deeper role. I think that
Sure.
if you look at a lot of his goals, he's got good feet, he's got pace, he can pick a ball up in deep positions. You know, he scores goals from outside the box. I mean, even when you looked at the City Cup final, the last couple of minutes, last minute, ball gets knocked over the top. Brilliant hold up play. His speed was lightning quick. Run at City. Got a free kick. Right inside their box, right when you needed it the most. He was
Yep.
good at relieving pressure. Um, so I think he's quite versatile. Whereas someone like Holland is a number 9 goal scorer outside the box who doesn't really offer you anything. But I think Hoyland has a lot of versatility to his game. I mean, you look at the goals against Galatasaray, right? He picks the ball up inside his own box. He can run at you at speed. He's someone that can play in a deeper role, almost like a Martial, um, which I think helps. But you're quite right in saying that when he plays high as a number 9, on the last defender, he tends to get suffocated out of the game. And when you play with inverted wingers, that's a problem.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the answer is going forward, but signing another striker that's different to him, I understand. Someone
Yeah.
like Sesko, it's tall, big target man. But how do you then go back to people like Garnacho and Hoyland and say you're no longer our starting striker or starting winger?
Yeah, it's hard. It is. It's difficult, and that is kind of the challenge of building a club. When you're really successful, like City have Holland and Alvarez, who are completely different players, right? Um, but you kind of know Holland is starting every game, every big game when he's fit. He's going to start. He's going to play. It's just how they play football, right? Um, it's it's a challenge to this is sort of it's really tricky because this is one of the challenges of top teams and why they sometimes go through a lot of change and turnover, especially in these forward positions, because in the midfield you get a lot of rotations and you get a lot of different setups and you get a lot of things like that. But there's definitely, you look at even Madrid right now. I mean, they just signed Mbappe, right, on top of everything that they have. And I sit there and I wonder, what are they going to do with Rodrigo? And you already get rumors of him potentially leaving. Now, they're so successful that people will stay because they are so successful, because you get to win Champions Leagues at Real
Yeah.
Madrid. You get to win Champions League. You get to have the best, the biggest club in the world. You get everything at Real Madrid. You look at their midfield and you think, how can they have that many players and anyone's happy? Because they win 6 Champions Leagues. That's why, because they will keep winning over and over and over. And that's the reason
Mhm.
why. And that is not where United are at now. And that's part of the challenge, because how do you get there? Like it's like the chicken or the egg thing, because you kind of need to be successful in order to be able to convince players to be in a more limited role, while at the same time, you need those players in order to get to that success. Because if you don't sign a really good backup striker and Rasmus Højlund gets a hamstring and is out for
Oh, I
two
know.
months, what happens? You're
Mhm.
screwed,
Yeah, I know.
then you
Mhm.
fail. And it's like, and it's the same thing with the wingers. If you lose Garnacho or Rashford for a few months next
Mhm.
season, and Garnacho played, what, 40 something games in a row.
Yeah.
I'm not saying he's going to get injured. I'm just saying that with young players, it's
So what do you
crazy
do
that
with the
that's
Mads?
happened. Well, and that's the other thing. I wish Ahmad had more minutes because he's shown promise, but it's almost he's in that difficult position where we haven't seen enough of him to say, and he's probably feeling the same way. I haven't played enough to feel secure about my future here, right? I wouldn't blame him for saying I want to go because I think I should be playing every minute somewhere. I wouldn't blame him for that and for being concerned about his role. There's odd things, Amari Forson got games over him earlier in the season, and he's left for free. That's
By the way, I don't understand that at all.
yeah, me
Why
neither. I
Amari
don't.
Forson played? First of all, I'm not disappointed that he's gone because
Me neither. He's
I never
not
saw
that good. I'm
anything when
not
he
trying to be
played.
mean. He's
Him
not that
playing.
good.
Well, I mean, he may be. I just never saw anything that when he
Yeah.
played for United that justified him
Yeah.
actually playing. But
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a weird.
But yeah,
Then I'm saying I look at someone like Ahmad, I would be questioning that, saying why did this guy get these games and these minutes over me at that time? But it is challenging. I mean, this is one of the things where obviously I think you need better planning overall, and it's more than just the manager. Wilcox and
well,
Ten Hag are going to have to work together and sit down with these guys and make them happy, and they're going to have to do that with anyone they want to sign too.
I think that at this point, Ahmad has earned the right to play next season and be a consideration.
think
I
so
thought he
too,
looked
yeah.
very, very good. And I think that if you need to get to a point where they're Real Madrid's level, where you have world-class players in every position, you're winning the Champions Leagues, you're winning leagues, then you can cut people, you can get rid of people like Ahmad. You say, okay, look, we're so deep with so much world-class talent, you can go. Same situation with Bruno Fernandes. If you're Real Madrid, you can let Bruno Fernandes go, but not if you're Man United because you don't have enough world-class quality. And bringing that level of player into the football club when you're finishing eighth is really, really difficult.
Yeah.
And I think given the budgetary issues, given that where United are at, whatever you sell, if you're bringing in somebody else for enormous wages, which is a risk. You also can't have Anthony as a fourth choice winger. So you would have to find a solution to that problem, which I don't know how you do. I mean, to me, it would be loan him out somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And hope he has a really good year like Sancho, and then maybe you can sell him a year on. But that's still a big hit considering you paid 85 million for him 2 seasons ago. I don't think it helps you at all with FFP or PSR, whatever you call it. And I just think that what you need to have right now and what the Ineos model looks to me like that they want to build this around young players.
Yep.
Ahmad will be someone they want to stay. What will be interesting? What is interesting, James, is that after the Crystal Palace game, if you read that Athletic article, Ten Hag was under pressure to adjust tactics, and does Ahmad fit into that? I don't know. He might. I thought he had a good end of the season. Maybe a bit unlucky to miss out in the cup final, obviously because Rashford came back fit. It was understandable why he did. But to me, I just think that under the Ineos, model that they want United to look like, Ahmad fits into that.
Yeah.
And I think Elise is someone that they would like, but I mean, the other aspect is who plays on the left if Rashford gets injured.
Mm-hmm.
Once you start, Garnacho would switch over to the left. Now you are really thin on the right.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm told that Rashford has no problems playing central, despite the things that are said.
Correct.
So it's possible that they might look at Rashford and say, okay, we're going to move you inside as well. It's an alternative to Højlund sometimes, which is going to leave us a little bit short on the left, which means we need another winger. Because I think Garnacho would prefer to play on the left.
Yeah,
would be plays on the left for Argentina. So I think he would prefer to play on the left himself. But it's going to be interesting to see how this team changes. Defensive midfield, the French media are claiming United have are close on Fofana. I have no information on that whatsoever, so I don't know. I don't know if you know anything about that.
Just the interest. I mean, he's definitely an option, but I do not know of any progress there. That one has been kind of funny because you still have to resolve Casemiro's situation, I think, to bring somebody
I
in
don't see
there.
any way Casemiro stays at the club, mate.
I don't either. I mean, you had the comments from Amrabat's
On the
brother
club.
that he sort of walked back, but we can all I mean, we can all
Mhm.
admit on what's probably gone on there, and I'm not even saying I blame him. I
Did he
understand.
welcome back? What did he say?
He sort of made some comment later about how it was out of context. It's sort of the thing that people say when
Out
they've
of
been caught with their
context.
pants down, He was pretty clear, uh,
Out of context.
there's it's like a what you tripped and she fell type of thing but so I think it's pretty
What was that?
obvious. What?
What was that? What did you
No,
say?
it's sort of like, you catch someone cheating and he's like, "Oh, I tripped and she fell," type of thing. It's out of context. But
No, nothing about that, mate. That sounds like something you have personal experience with.
I
I've never
can't
used that
say that I
excuse for
do.
injury. I actually did read an article online the other day that said that wrestlers were catching STDs on high school wrestling matches. I'm like,
Right.
fucking hell, that
Mhm.
one.
Yeah, that's a good one, right?
I just think it's a joke. Not that
Yeah,
I've ever had one, just in case that ever happens in the future.
just in case. You got an excuse lined up.
Mhm.
No, but obviously, it's been a tough season for him. He was upset about playing, getting some of the criticism he got playing at center back, understandably. Upset about certain things, dropped from the Brazilian national team, and then finally you have your defense fit and you miss out on the cup final. He was
Mhm.
very off, and then pulling out of the team an hour before, didn't stick around for the celebrations. Everybody on earth can see what is happening there, and I
Yeah,
don't see a way back. I think it's fine. It's best for everybody if he goes, so long as he has somewhere to
yeah.
go. Obviously, Ronaldo's been trying to recruit him to Saudi, like you mentioned a few times before.
Mhm.
The guy who runs the Saudi league is a bit odd because it's not necessarily a team looking for him, but there's, a guy, Michael Emiliano, or whoever, sort of like the director for a
There's
bunch of
no Chelsea
teams.
there.
Yeah. And then he's looking to move players and then he'll place them. That's probably the best route for him considering his cost and wages. I think that does need to be resolved. I don't see any way that it can't be resolved for them to move in the midfield. Um, I think they've got a lot of targets. I think, there's guys like Onana at Everton, but if you go and pay for Braithwaite, they're going to ask for an enormous amount of money for him. That makes it more difficult. Um, Yeoman at Sporting is a good name.
Paulinho?
Yeah, and that's interesting, but it seems like he's dead set on joining Bayern personally, which probably takes him out of the equation. But
João Neves?
you, I just can't see it happening. They want so much money, and I think we all know they're not in a position to pay 100 million euros for anybody this summer. It's just not possible in that
I think
respect.
when you look at like João Felix and you look at Darwin Nunez and stuff, it's a massive risk paying
Mm,
100 million for players from Portugal. They can
yes.
be exceptional players, but that to me would sound like something you would do with a bunch of add-ons and protect yourself.
Yeah, I
You
agree.
know, because but like the Dutch league and that it can be hit or miss. You can get exceptional players. The adaptation to the Premier League is so difficult. I mean, I remember when Fabio Silva signed for Wolves for 35 million, and he looked like a kid that was miles off Premier League level
Yep.
because
Yep.
the adjustment is huge. Some kids can make it, some can't. João Neves, watched quite a bit of him against Ireland the other night there. Um, Talented kid. It's interesting that Roberto Martinez is already starting him in that midfield. Three centre backs, two full wing backs, three in the middle with Bruno Fernandes. Um, he's a very talented kid, but it's a lot of money for a team that's struggling to find money on one player. Um,
Yeah.
I would love to see him come to United. You want to see young players coming to
Yeah.
United. That would be very exciting. I would love to see him, there's always obviously the Ronaldo example, but I would love to
I
see him at
think,
United.
yeah,
I've
I
always
think,
said Antonio Silva played very well, and
yeah.
he started in defense with Goncalo Inacio.
Yes, yes. Yeah, and those are other names, obviously. I think the problem with Portugal is there's a lot of good players that have moved there, some real successes, Ruben Diaz and these types of guys. But I think because of that, the prices have gone out of control to where it's almost like, you're paying on the hope because, like Darwin Nunez is a good player. He's been fairly successful.
A
He's
number of
got
years
like
ago.
30 goal contributions last year. That's pretty good. Um, but he's not an
I think
80
he is. Yeah,
million player.
did you count the one at Old Trafford where he handled where he passed the ball straight to McTominay, who passed it to Rashford and scored? Is
You
that
got to
one of his
add
goal
that one on.
contributions?
You got to add that one on. But he's
McTominay
not an
is
80
a very good
million
footballer.
player. But
I'll
he's
always
better than a
disagree.
lot of strikers that are out there that have been purchased he's better than a lot of the forwards that you've seen in the Premier. I mean, he's a lot better than paying 80 million for Anthony.
Then who?
I would still swap than 80 million for Anthony. I would still swap him if you asked me for
Yeah,
sure.
but
But
to me,
it's still
what would worry me
inflated.
about Nunez is that he doesn't look like a good footballer. I can see goal scorers that struggling with the adaptation, but to me, he lacks so many things that I expect. His first touch is not great. His awareness is not great. Sometimes he can
Oh no,
finish.
no, there's no
He misses
doubt.
a lot of very
Yeah.
easy chances that
Well,
you expect a striker to take. I don't know, man. I don't see a good
he's
football in him.
certainly
I
a
don't.
severe overpay, and that has been a lot of the case of a lot of the players that have come from Portugal recently, where they've cost too much money by far.
Yeah,
Because you're paying kind of for potential or the hope that they're going to be good,
of course.
but I think the cost has outweighed the return in most instances recently. And you take a João Neves, I think he's a really good player. I think 100 million or anything even close to that is an insane risk on a player like
Here's the
that in that
thing.
league.
Here's the thing, man. If you were watching the Real Madrid Champions League final, one thing about their midfield is they're big,
Yep.
physical,
Yep.
and they're technical. They have speed. I mean, Camavinga, these players, big, strong boys, great
Yes.
engines.
Yes.
That give you
Chouameni, I mean,
physicality.
yeah.
These are players that have tremendous physicality about them, athleticism, that are
Yeah.
very, very good on the ball, technically very good. But they give you the energy that United have been badly missing in midfield. They
Yep.
give you John Evans is small, would give you the energy. Still a lot to learn about his game, but I think United need another player. When you've already got an 18-year-old, a 19-year-old in there with
Yes.
Mainu, I
Yes.
think United needs someone in beside Mainu. It's maybe 24, 25 bracket that has tremendous engine, that is right at the peak of his career, where he's out of that, fledgling part
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
young players pick up a lot of injuries between the
Yep.
18 to 22 part, where you go, okay, this is a guy ready to hit the ground immediately. Arsenal have that in Declan Rice. You
Yeah.
heard
Someone
David Moyes
physically
say
imposing. Yeah.
one of the biggest differences between this season and last season was losing Rice. United need someone.
Yep.
They're not cheap, but they're going to have to buy them from a French league or a Portuguese league,
Yeah.
or maybe even Italian league, where I wouldn't have minded Douglas Luiz, to be honest. I think he's a very,
Yeah.
very good
Yeah.
player. But someone like this, where you can go out and get a player that's not at peak market price, but below that, but is ready to step in right away.
Yeah, for sure. And because I mean, the best fit would have been, ironically, of course, Casemiro a few years younger. Someone with that type of ability, that type of skill set, who's big, who's physical, who's fast,
I
who's got a good.
have my doubts about that because
What's that?
I accept what you're saying, but to me, I look at Casemiro and I think he's a player that's perfectly suited to somewhere like Spain, where it's not a million miles an hour football, where he has
Yeah, I
time
mean,
on the
that's a
ball.
fair
If
point.
you saw him
Yeah.
in the Champions League, right, he was really, really
Yeah.
good in the Champions League because a bit slower, you're
Yeah.
more time on the ball,
That's fair
and
in possession for
but
sure.
yeah, I know what
I
you
would
mean,
agree
but
with that. Yeah.
yes, maybe even if he had the legs, I'm still not 100% certain that he's a Declan Rice type midfielder.
Yeah, for
United
sure.
need someone, but yeah, but someone like of that class, no
Yeah.
doubt.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and it's hard to find that. I mean, that's one of the most. That's why it's sort of disappointing that after all the years of tracking Declan Rice, they didn't get him because
Well, I just
that's
couldn't
tough.
afford him.
That's a
I
hell of
mean,
a
they
tough
wanted him
profile.
during COVID.
Yeah.
They wanted it. They ended up, I think it was Van de Beek they went for instead. But I mean, Rice wanted to come. United just weren't willing to
Yep.
pay what West Ham wanted. It's going to be an interesting summer. It's going to be a busy summer.
Yep.
First major decision has been made, which I think took too long. I think any of us will learn from it. But nonetheless, we're here. And it, I said something on the podcast a couple of weeks ago about Tosin and wanting to know who the manager was before players signed. That was also not the Tosin example, but the fact that players wanted to know who the manager was before they came to Manchester United. So hopefully now United can start moving and on targets. It also will allow players who considering their future to now know exactly what they want to do, because I'm sure some of their future was contingent upon who the manager was going to be. We know at least one of those,
Yep.
Jadon Sancho, and of course there'll be many others. We will see what happens, mate. Okay, I'm sure we'll be back next week. Maybe before, we'll see what happens. But thanks to all of you for downloading the podcast, as always, for following me, for following James, for subscribing to our platforms and all the support. It is very, very much appreciated. I'll let you go, mate. Take it easy.
Yeah. Thank you all. See you later.
Bye, folks.